All right, welcome back. Let's continue our discussion of IDPS systems. I showed you an example of Sophos. Now I want to show you what the guy in that video said was under the hood, which is Snort. So Snort is one of the first and most popular open source IDPS systems. Obviously runs on Linux. Let me show you an example of what Snort looks like, because it's actually super easy. This is something you can install and play around with. Hang on. Okay, here's a little tutorial about Snort. I'll try to get the volume right for you. I'm advancing it to the 2-minute mark because there's some other kind of fluff in this video. It's about as low production value as my videos, so I can't throw stones or anything. But here, let's listen to like 2 minutes of him. I think that's what we're 2 minutes to 4-minute mark. Okay, here. Whoop. Switch back. Here we go.
Well, it is. I just thought that we needed some prior information to better understand Snort and what it all does. So let's talk about some Snort basics then. There are different modes that Snort can be run in: sniffer mode, packet logging mode, or network intrusion detection system mode, or NIDS.
So notice NIDS.
For sniffer mode, it decodes the packets and dumps them to the screen. That's all there is to it. This command's /snort-v just shows the IP, TCP, or UDP, or ICMP headers, and that's it.
That's it. That's all there is to it.
Command snort-vd shows the packet data as well as the headers. Packet logging mode saves those packet dumps to a disk. In this first example, I ran snort as verbose while showing the packet headers and data and logged it to a directory. This home network option is necessary so that reading the log is easier. This is so Snort knows which network is the source and the destination if it's on the same network. In default mode, Snort logs packets in ASCII text, but it can also be run in binary mode for a more compact form. Binary mode also logs the entire packet and can be read from other packet analysis tools as well, such as TCP dump. To read back the packets that you have logged, you can use this last command. You can specify only certain packets when you read back the log, such as only ICMP packets or packets from a specific host. The filters use BPF syntax. More can be found online if you are interested. So I logged everything. What am I going to do with all these packets? If only there is a mode that allowed me to choose what I should log. That is why NIDS mode exists, so you don't have to log every single packet that comes across your network.
Okay, let's pause there. What I want you to focus on here is just notice how short these and simple these commands are. Now it is all completely command line interface, so that's why other tools like Sophos that give you a kind of nice GUI wrapper around the whole thing are popular. But Snort is something free to download and install in Linux. There might even be a Windows version. But this would be something good to play around with. If you're really going to use this as a IDPS system at home, you'd want to have 2 network cards, right? An in and an out on an old PC or something. But that would work. So that's Snort. There's obviously more to it than that, but I just want to show you how easy the commands are. And it's free. Yeah, so where are you going to put these IDPS systems? The textbook talks about 3 strategies. You can centralize everything. Now this makes sense if you have one corporate location to centralize everything. You can distribute your IDPSs around. This makes sense if you have a bunch of locations kind of spread out across the country, around the world. You might need one at each LAN site, partially distributed, obviously hybrid between the two. What's more helpful is what NIST recommends for where to put these boxes. In the DMZ, certainly makes sense. I think I've drawn this up for you before in class, where you've got two firewalls, and in between the 2 firewalls, you've just got a little switch where you can plug stuff in, like a web server, or an IDPS system would go in that DMZ, that extranet area. Even outside your firewall, before things even get into the extranet, on major network backbones. So just this would be inside the network, which kind of makes sense. So to kind of assume that something got past your firewall to scan inside the network makes sense. And critical subnets, what's a critical subnet? Well, something like where the subnet where your data center is, where all your servers are located, maybe where all the HR servers are. Just anything critical that you want to give a little extra protection to, maybe for your executives. It really depends on the business needs. That's right. Shifting gears. Okay, just some terminology here. You do want to understand what a honeypot is. So a honeypot is any device. Well, it could be software, it could be hardware. Here lately, it's more hardware than anything. Anything that's going to lure a hacker to a fake server and then trip an alarm so that you know that there's been an intruder. So that, instead of somebody hacking away at your actual Active Directory server, maybe you've set up a fake Active Directory server, something that looks like it's broadcasting like it's an AD server. So that people will try to attack that. So honeypot is just a strategy for luring attacks to a different area. Honey nets are a little more complicated, but think of things like those cyber attack maps we've looked at in class, and remember the spinning one was kind of spinning around and would zoom in and out. Might have been Kaspersky, might have been another one. Norse used to have a really good one, but they're not actually, those sites aren't measuring actual attacks. They have created a network of their own honeypots around the world, and that's the traffic that they're picking up on, is attacks on those honeypots that they've set up. But if I were to do this today, I mentioned this the last time we got together, and I just wanted to remind you about Canary, because this seems to be a big trend. These are cheap little devices that you just sprinkle around the network, at least in the 4 NIST locations, right? And they're just tripwires. They're kind of set up to look like tasty, juicy routers and servers and such. You can configure it any way you want with a couple of clicks, and boom, you just set it on the network, and then it'll let you know if it detects a problem. I think this is a super smart idea. A little more vocabulary, just for the exam, you want to understand the difference between enticement and entrapment. So enticement is sprinkling these canaries around as honeypots to try to attract a hacker. Entrapment is when you're intentionally trying to lure an individual into committing a crime in order to get a conviction. Now, this is a legal distinction. I'm not an attorney. All I can tell you is enticement is okay, entrapment is not. And now, if you're working for military or government affiliated organization, they may have some special rules around when entrapment is okay, but that's when you need to talk to your local legal department. So typically, you're not going to do kind of this offensive hacking where you're trying to entrap criminals and then prosecute. Let's look at the Mac Daddy of exploit tools. Part of intrusion detection and prevention is doing regular penetration tests on a network. Typically, this is something you're going to outsource to a company to do. Now, you might have internal auditors that do this, but it's usually better to outsource this. Very large organizations are going to have their own pen testing teams or red teams. When I say red team, I mean red team is offense versus blue team is defense. We'll talk about these books here in a second, but let's talk about Metasploit, which is a very common tool for pen testing, also for hacking. So the idea behind Metasploit is it's a framework, it's a platform for a bunch of different tools. So you would use Metasploit not to do the actual attack, but to kind of log everything. So you would do it for your initial reconnaissance to gather information, dump that information into a Metasploit database, and then it will go through and find if there are any vulnerabilities on those versions of servers that it found, and then it'll let you know if there are any exploits that are available to take advantage of those vulnerabilities. Look at the precise language I'm using. And then with a click, you can kick off a script to run those exploits and then download the results into Metasploit. So it's kind of keeping track of all the different tools that you're using. But I like this particular video. It's long, 10 minutes. Ooh, I know that's super long. But it shows you kind of the business process of step by step, being methodical, whether you're using this for hacking, don't do that, or pen testing. Probably a good skill. You want to be methodical about it. So let's take a look. Okay, this is an important video, and I would take some notes on this. I want you to know what all of these terms are for the exam. Okay, here we go.
Hello and welcome to Rapid7's Whiteboard Wednesdays. My name is Chris Kirsch. I'm the Product Marketing Manager at Rapid7 for Metasploit. Today I'd like to talk about penetration testing because it's a topic that especially people who are new to the industry have a lot of questions about. So let me walk you through what a penetration test is and what it isn't. And I want to compare and contrast a little bit with other things. So first of all, some people think a penetration test is the same as port scanning, and it's not really the same thing. So I'm going to take a little analogy here, and let's assume that your network is a house. So port scanning would be, looking with some binoculars or something at all the different doors and windows, all the entry points into the house, and looking which ones are open and closed. So this translates into, let's say this is a computer, port 80 would be HTTPS, or HTTP, and so you can scan which ports are open, and that's port scanning. It tells you what, where the machine accepts connections. Then the next thing is vulnerability management, and that's really like sending a home inspector over to your house with a focus on security. So this guy here comes up with a clipboard and he says, hey, this door here looks a little old, it's a little, maybe run down and so on. It would be easy to kick it in, or the lock is a really cheap lock. You should probably change that out because it's really easy to pick. And he writes up that checklist and delivers a report to you. That's vulnerability scanning. And then penetration testing is actually when you send this little ninja to your house to try to break in. So it's really looking at the network and trying to break into the network with whatever means necessary. It might be smashing the window, it might be using a couple of lock picks to pick the lock on the door that the vulnerability scanner highlighted and so on. So that's really the difference. So why would you conduct a pen test? There are many, many different reasons for that. The first one is to prevent a data breach. Very high level goal. We all see a lot of data breaches in the headlines. So that's the primary goal. And that helps you identify where you have weaknesses on the network. Really kind of trying the same attack methods as malicious hackers on the internet to try and break in. Then also you can test your security controls. You probably have firewalls, you have your DLP, IPS, IDS, and so on. You want to see if they're working. So with a penetration test, you can really simulate an attack on your network and then figure out, do your controls pick that up? Does your security team pick that up? Do you get, a phone call? You might not even want to alert your security team that you're doing a pen test. Then, as you're rolling out a new system, before you put that live into production, you may want to conduct a pen test to make sure that the system is secure, that you're not exposing your data. Let's say you're a CISO in a new organization, and you're trying to...
Sorry, I paused the wrong one. Notice here that a pen test is partially a test of technology, but it's also a test of people, right? And process, because you're trying to see how long it takes your security team to catch the intrusion, to see it to recognize it as an incident, and initiate their incident response plan, IRP, that we've talked about previously.
To figure out, hey, where should I spend my security dollars? Where do I need to focus my efforts? And so doing a penetration test kind of gives you that insight. It really tells you, hey, we were able to breach this network with X, Y, and Z methods. These systems are insecure and so on. So do that. And of course, one big reason for doing security measures is also compliance. And if we think about PCI, PCI actually requires you to do regular pen tests.
PCI remembers for credit card information. What would be more relevant today would be GDPR tests.
So let me move over to this part of the board. So what are the
Compliance.
steps of a penetration test? And I think this really helps people better understand what a penetration test is and does. So first of all, before you start, you need to establish a goal. So your goal may be to, say, breach a credit card database. So that might be the goal of the penetration test. So the penetration tester is going to say, all right, I'm going to try and do everything I can to get to that database. So once the goal is set, you want to do some reconnaissance. That means you're going to research on the internet, do lookups on like what servers belong to the organization. You'll look up on LinkedIn, on Facebook, whatever you can find out on about the organization on the internet and everywhere else. You might also phone into the organization.
Before he goes on to step 3, in step 1, the goal typically is going to be handed to the pen testing team by the organization's leadership team. They're going to establish the goal and then authorize the pen test. So just doing a callback to our definition of hacking, hacking is accessing a database, a network without authorization. So step 1 includes obtaining authorization from the company. Without that authorization, all the rest of this is just straight illegal criminal hacking. So there's an important ethical distinction here. Ethical and legal.
Then you start the network discovery. So you're actually scanning the network. And this is essentially port scanning. You're scanning what servers are there, what hosts are there, what ports are they open on. And then you start the actual intrusion. So you start with an exploitation. That means you're actually using little pieces of software to exploit or to exploit vulnerabilities in the network and to take control over systems. There are also some other ways to get into the systems. For example, brute forcing. If people are using weak passwords, or if these passwords are leaked anywhere, or if they're shared across trust zones, you can really use brute forcing. Also, there is social engineering, which essentially means trying to trick people into clicking on phishing emails. You might leave a malicious file on a USB key in the bathroom or drop it in the parking lot outside the company that you're trying to contest. And that will get you control over the computer. And then in the end, once you've completed these steps, then you actually have control over the machine. So you can do all sorts of fun stuff. You could, for example, upload, download files. You can read out password files, password hashes, and reuse those to get deeper into the network. You can take screenshots. You can even switch on the little webcam on the laptop and take video. You can listen to audio. Everything that you can do as a user on the machine, you can now do on that laptop or other computer. And then once you have access to that one machine, it might just have been a phishing email through social engineering. You have access to that one machine. You can then pivot to other machines in the network. So that basically means like you jump from one point that you got into the network to the next machine, to the next machine, and so on.
Pivoting.
And then in the end, when you're done, before you do your report, you need to collect some evidence. You need to prove to the people who entrusted you with a pen test that you got in. And so you collect all of the different things that I mentioned before when I talked about taking control, like downloading files, taking screenshots, all of these things, collecting passwords. All of these count as evidence that you got into the machine. And then you create your report, which is basically a write-up of like all the things you tried and all the things that were successful in conducting that penetration test. Deliver that report, then hopefully there will be some remediation and mitigation to stop a real attacker from getting in based on the things that you found. There are also some other considerations. So if you're think about the scope, like that's a little bit related to the goal, like what do you want to test, but also what means do you want to allow people to test. So for example, a lot of organizations say, hey, I want you to attack our servers, but I don't want you to use social engineering. That's a decision you can make. It's part of your decision, so that would be part of the scope, for example. Or you would limit it certain networks or network segments, certain time zones, certain times maybe. Then also, do you want to do an internal or an external pen test? And that essentially means, do you assume that the attacker is coming from the outside of the network, kind of attacking your company over the internet? Or are they inside the network already? It could be a malicious insider. It could also be, some consultant or somebody who's got physical access to your network, plugged in a box into the network and sniffed network traffic and so on, and is going from there from inside the organization. So that's part of your scope and your starting decision of, like, what's my attack vector that I'm trying to test and protect against. Then, of course, you want to test safely. So here, you really should plan out your steps very carefully, especially when you're testing in production networks. You want to make sure that you use only reliable exploits. And tools like Metasploit allow you to do that by ranking the exploits. So, for example, exploits are ranked, by reliability. Only, excellent and great reliability should be used in production environments, and so that really helps you to not affect production. Then also one consideration is, do you want to do the pen test in-house or do you want to outsource it? Typically, if you only have one pen test a year, you may want to outsource it because training up your internal resources may not be worth it for that time, or buying the tool. So in that case, you may want to go with a consultant. If you want to test more, or if you want to, let's say, pre-test before you have an official audit, or do a regular pen test, let's say every month, so that you not only have a spot check every year, but actually an ongoing kind of view of the network security, then you may want to do it in-house, train somebody up, buy a tool, and run the pen tests in-house. So those are some considerations. And then also selecting your pen tester. If you're choosing somebody internally or externally, you should make sure that they're well trained as a penetration tester, either for an internal resource, choose somebody, hire somebody who has already done pen testing, or if you want to use an existing in-house resource, then, train them up, look for a good way to get them familiar with the tool and with the space. All right. That's it for today. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you soon.
Okay. Here's your first Easter egg. Email me with what this guy is holding in his hand for class engagement points. Okay. What is he holding in his hand? Now, let me back up to where we can see the list. I would just point out that steps, let me see if I can back up. Okay, get out of the way, get out of the way. I'm trying to show the whole list. That's not it. Anyway, the difference between a hacker and a pen tester is probably steps 9, 10, and 11. Because otherwise, they're the same steps. So steps 1 through 8 is everything a hacker does, including step 1. I think most criminals have a goal in mind. They're not trying to just get in there and cause trouble. They have something specific they're going after. So they have goals and objectives. So 1 through 8 is going to be hacking, but if you add collecting evidence and reporting it and remediation, that's what makes it a business process, really, at that point, a professional process. Okay, so let's pause here, and I'll upload this video, and we'll continue in just a bit.